He dragged the unconscious CEO from a jammed elevator, saved her and her unborn child, yet got fired for breaching safety protocol. Overnight, single-dad janitor Elias Turner became the villain of Stratton Industries. But the woman he saved, Serafina Caldwell, brilliant and pregnant, could not forget him. When corporate lies, surveillance footage, and a dangerous CFO surrounded them, Serafina confessed the impossible truth. The baby was not her fiancé's. A fertility lab mistake tied her fate to Elias and exposed a billion-dollar crime. The morning rush at Stratton Industries moved like clockwork. The towering glass headquarters in downtown Seattle reflected the pale winter sun, its 30 floors humming with ambition and urgency. Executives strode through the lobby with leather briefcases. Assistants balanced coffee cups and tablets. Security guards nodded at familiar faces. Deep in the service corridors below, where fluorescent lights buzzed and the air smelled of cleaning solution, Elias Turner pushed a maintenance cart past rows of utility closets. He was 36 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, with kind eyes that carried the weight of quiet loss. His uniform was clean but faded. His hands, calloused from work, moved with practiced efficiency. He had been a biomedical technician once, back when his wife was alive, back when the future held different promises. Cancer had taken her 3 years ago. Now he worked night shifts as a janitor, raising his 7-year-old daughter Callie alone, making sure she never saw how tired he was. At 8:47 that morning, a sudden power surge rippled through the building. Lights flickered. Computer screens went dark for 3 seconds, then blazed back to life. Most people barely noticed, but Elias, checking a supply room near the elevator bank, heard something wrong. A muffled thump. A high-pitched whine of machinery straining. Then silence. He moved toward the sound. One of the executive elevators had stopped between floors. Through the narrow gap in the doors, he could see smoke curling upward. He pressed his ear to the metal. A woman's voice, faint and panicked, called for help. Elias did not hesitate. His engineering instincts took over. He grabbed his janitor's key ring, found the emergency override, and forced the panel open. The elevator had stopped 18 inches below the floor level. Inside, slumped against the mirrored wall, was Serafina Caldwell. She was 34 years old, the youngest CEO Stratton Industries had ever appointed. Her long blonde hair fell in waves over her shoulders. She wore a red V-neck bodycon dress that clung to her frame, revealing what she had been hiding from the shareholders for months. She was pregnant. Her eyes were half closed. On her wrist, a small medical device beeped irregularly, monitoring the fetal heartbeat. Elias squeezed through the gap, his shoulders barely fitting. The smoke was acrid, coming from a burned circuit panel. He knelt beside her, checking her pulse. It was weak, but steady. He spoke to her in a low, calm voice, the way he spoke to Callie when she had nightmares. "Stay with me. Help is coming. You are going to be fine." Serafina's eyes fluttered open. She tried to speak, but her breath was shallow. The monitor on her wrist beeped faster, then slower, then faster again. Elias had seen enough medical emergencies to know what that meant. He positioned her carefully, elevated her legs, and kept her conscious with steady pressure on her hand. His other hand reached for his radio, calling for paramedics. When the fire team finally pried the doors fully open, they lifted Serafina onto a stretcher. As she was carried away, her fingers closed around Elias's wrist. Her eyes locked onto his. Camera flashes erupted from somewhere in the crowd. Someone was recording. In that moment, beneath the chaos and the smoke and the flashing lights, something passed between them that neither could name. Stratton Industries was a world divided. Above ground, the offices gleamed with polished marble and floor-to-ceiling windows. Executive assistants wore designer heels. Conference rooms had Italian espresso machines. The air conditioning was always perfect. Below ground, in the service tunnels and maintenance corridors, the walls were cinder block, painted industrial beige. The floors were concrete. The only sounds were the hum of boilers and the distant clang of pipes. Elias Turner lived in both worlds, but belonged to neither. He arrived at work each night after putting Callie to bed, kissed her forehead, and left her with Mrs. Alvarez next door. He took the bus 40 minutes from their modest apartment complex in Tacoma. A neighborhood where chain-link fences enclosed small yards, and the grocery store had barred windows. He clocked in through the service entrance, where no cameras watched, where no one knew his name. Serafina Caldwell lived in the world above. She had earned her position through brilliance and relentless focus. A degree from Stanford, an MBA from Wharton. She had taken over Stratton Industries 2 years ago, during a turbulent merger, and stabilized the company with surgical precision. But she was alone. Her ex-fiancé, Clinton Marlowe, had left her 6 months earlier, shortly before she began the IVF procedure. She had decided to become a mother anyway, using a donor from the fertility clinic partnered with Stratton's medical research division. She hid her growing belly beneath loose blazers and oversized scarves. She feared that the board, already uneasy with her youth and gender, would see her pregnancy as weakness. Damian Crosswell, the CFO, was a different kind of predator. He was in his mid-40s, pale and angular, with sharp cheekbones and icy gray eyes. His blonde hair was slicked back with precision. He wore silver suits tailored in Milan, and a diamond watch that caught the light when he signed documents. He spoke in smooth, measured tones, but his smile never reached his eyes. He had been passed over for the CEO position when Serafina was appointed, and he had been waiting ever since for her to fail. Damian had authorized maintenance shortcuts to rush the building inspection before the merger audit. The elevator malfunction was not an accident. It was the result of a bypassed EB14 sensor, a small but critical safety feature that would have prevented the power surge from jamming the doors. He had signed the approval himself, buried in a stack of routine paperwork. When the elevator trapped Serafina, Damian saw an opportunity. Dr. Louisa Penn, Serafina's obstetrician, had warned her that stress could endanger the pregnancy. Serafina had ignored the advice. She worked 16-hour days. She skipped meals. She attended board meetings while her back ached and her ankles swelled. She told herself she could handle it. She told herself she had no choice. Beatrix Collins, the HR director, spoke in rehearsed tones and followed protocols with rigid efficiency. She did not ask questions. She did not challenge authority. When Damian instructed her to handle the janitor situation, she opened the file, printed the termination letter, and scheduled the meeting. Ronnie Hale, Elias's friend from the maintenance crew, was a wiry man in his 50s with streetwise humor and a sharp eye for trouble. He had worked at Stratton for 20 years. He knew which executives tipped at Christmas and which ones pretended the cleaning staff did not exist. He knew when something was wrong. The day after the rescue, Elias was summoned to Human Resources. The office was on the 14th floor. Far above the world he knew, Beatrix Collins sat behind a glass desk, her expression neutral. Across from her, Damian Crosswell leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Watching, Beatrix slid a document across the desk. Elias read it slowly. The words were cold and clinical. Unauthorized entry into a restricted area. Violation of safety protocol. Liability concerns. Effective immediately. His employment was terminated. Elias looked up. He did not raise his voice. He simply asked, why? Beatrix repeated the language from the letter. Damian said nothing. But there was a faint amusement in his eyes, the way a cat watches a mouse before the final pounce. Elias stood. He collected the cardboard box they had prepared for him, containing his spare uniform, a thermos, and a photo of Callie. He walked out through the lobby, past the executives who did not look at him, past the security guards who averted their eyes. Outside, the winter air bit at his skin. He stood on the sidewalk, holding the box, and wondered how he would explain this to his daughter. Inside the building, Serafina Caldwell sat in her corner office, still pale and shaken. She had been released from the hospital that morning with strict instructions to rest. Instead, she had returned to work. Her assistant had tried to block her, but Serafina waved her away. She replayed the CCTV footage of the rescue on her laptop, again and again. She watched Elias squeeze through the gap, kneel beside her, speak to her with calm certainty. She watched her own hand reach for his. She watched the camera flashes. And she watched, through the glass wall, as he was escorted out of the building with a cardboard box. She reached for her phone to call him back, to thank him, to correct the injustice. But her assistant knocked on the door. The board wanted to see her. There was a meeting about the merger. There were investors on the line. Serafina closed the laptop. She told herself she would fix it later. By that evening, the story had already twisted. An internal email circulated among the executive team. Subject line: Liability Incident Report. The email, drafted by Damien's office, described the elevator malfunction as the result of unauthorized tampering. It suggested that the janitor had entered the shaft without proper clearance, endangering both himself and the CEO. It noted that swift action had been taken to protect the company's interests. The email did not mention that Elias had saved Serafina's life. It did not mention the fetal heart monitor, or the smoke, or the fact that she would have been unconscious for another 12 minutes before the fire team arrived. It did not mention any of that. By the next morning, the narrative had leaked online. A grainy video, shot by someone in the crowd, showed Elias being escorted from the building. The caption read, "Stratton Industries janitor fired after CEO elevator incident." The comments speculated. Some called him a hero. Others, fed by the internal narrative, called him reckless. The company issued a brief statement. An internal matter. Personnel decisions made in the interest of safety. No further comment. Damien Crosswell watched the chaos unfold from his office. He sipped his espresso and drafted another email, this time to the PR department. "Keep the janitor's name out of the press," he wrote. "Frame it as a procedural issue. Investors are nervous enough about the merger. We cannot afford distractions." Serafina received anonymous messages on her office phone. A man's voice, distorted and cold, told her to stay quiet about the malfunction. Another message arrived by email, from an untraceable address. "Let it go. Do not make this public." Serafina deleted the messages, but her hands shook. At home, Elias hid the termination notice in a drawer. When Callie asked why he was home early, he smiled and told her he had taken a few days off. She was 7 years old, with her mother's curls and Elias's steady gaze. She asked if they could go to the park. He said yes. They spent the afternoon on the swings, and he did not tell her that the bills were piling up, or that his savings would last maybe 2 months, or that he had no idea what came next. That night, after Callie was asleep, Elias sat at the kitchen table and opened his laptop. He searched for the story online. He read the comments. He saw his own face in the grainy video, blurred and unrecognizable. He saw the headlines that reduced him to a liability. A problem solved. He closed the laptop and stared at the wall. Across the city, in her penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay, Serafina Caldwell could not sleep. She stood by the window, one hand resting on her belly, and watched the lights of the ferries moving across the dark water. She thought about the janitor's calm voice. She thought about his hands, steady and sure. She thought about the fact that she owed him her life and her child's life, and she had done nothing. 1 week later, on a rainy evening, a black sedan pulled into the parking lot of a modest apartment complex in Tacoma. The buildings were low and aging, with peeling paint and rusted railings. Children's toys lay scattered in the common area. A chain-link fence enclosed a small patch of grass. Serafina Caldwell stepped out of the car, wearing jeans and a loose sweater, her blonde hair tucked under a dark hood. She had never been to this part of the city. Her driver stayed with the vehicle, engine running. She walked carefully across the wet pavement, following the address her assistant had found in the employee files. Outside apartment 212, a little girl sat on the concrete steps, fixing a broken toy car. She had dark curls and serious eyes. She looked up when Serafina approached. The woman asked if Elias Turner lived here. The girl nodded. She called inside. Elias appeared in the doorway, wary and confused. He recognized her immediately, though she looked different outside the boardroom. Smaller, more human. Serafina introduced herself, though she did not need to. She said she wanted to thank him. She tried to offer him money. An envelope she had prepared. Enough to cover months of rent. Elias did not take it. He said he did not want money. He said, "Just tell the truth." Before Serafina could respond, headlights flared across the parking lot. A tinted SUV, parked across the street, flashed a camera. Someone was watching. Someone was recording. Elias stepped instinctively in front of Serafina, his body blocking hers, the way he would shield Callie from danger. Serafina felt it then. The surveillance, the control. Someone inside the company did not want her here. Someone wanted Elias silenced, and she realized, with cold certainty, that she was not the only one in danger. She asked him to meet her the next morning, privately. She said she owed him more than thanks. She said she needed his help. Elias hesitated, glancing back at Callie, who was watching from the doorway. Then he nodded. The next morning, in a sealed conference room on the 20th floor, Serafina spread documents across the table. Elias stood beside her, still uncomfortable in the executive space. But his eyes were sharp. She showed him the maintenance logs from the week before the elevator malfunction. He scanned them quickly, his finger tracing the rows of approvals and inspections. There. He pointed to a line buried in the middle of the page. Routine bypass authorization, signed by the CFO. EB14 sensor. Elias explained it in simple terms. That sensor was the failsafe. It monitored power surges and prevented the doors from jamming. Without it, the elevator became a trap. Someone had deliberately removed the safety feature. Serafina felt the air leave her lungs. She asked why anyone would do that. Elias did not answer immediately. He pulled up the building blueprints on his phone, comparing them to the maintenance schedule. He pointed out the timing. The bypass was authorized 2 days before the merger audit. The audit required a clean building inspection. A malfunctioning sensor would have delayed everything. Serafina understood. Damien had cut corners to meet the deadline. The malfunction was not an accident. It was negligence, buried under layers of corporate efficiency. And when it went wrong, when she was trapped in that elevator, he had turned the janitor into a scapegoat. She called Constance Lee, her legal counsel, into the room. Constance was in her 50s, sharp and unflappable, with silver hair and reading glasses that hung on a chain. She listened as Elias explained the bypass. She took notes. She asked precise questions. Then she looked at Serafina and said, "If we pursue this, we are accusing the CFO of criminal negligence. The board will fight us. The investors will panic. Are you prepared for that?" Serafina did not hesitate. She said yes. They formed a quiet alliance. Serafina provided access to the files. Elias provided the technical expertise. Constance mapped the legal strategy. They worked in secret, meeting in sealed rooms, using encrypted messages. The risk was immense. If the board discovered what they were doing, Serafina would lose her position. If Damien discovered, the consequences would be worse. But Serafina could not let it go. She replayed the CCTV footage again and again. She saw Elias's calm face, his steady hands. She saw the truth buried under the lies. And she decided that truth mattered more than her career. Late one night, the three of them were still in the conference room, reviewing blueprints and contracts, when Serafina stood too quickly and swayed. The room tilted. Elias caught her before she fell, his arm around her shoulders, guiding her into a chair. Constance called Dr. Louisa Penn, who arrived 20 minutes later with a medical bag and a stern expression. Dr. Penn checked Serafina's blood pressure, listened to the baby's heartbeat, and told her she was working herself into early labor. She prescribed rest, fluids, and sanity. Serafina promised to slow down. Dr. Penn did not believe her. After the doctor left, Constance went home. Elias stayed. He made tea in the small office kitchenette, the way he used to make it for his wife during her chemotherapy. He brought Serafina a cup. And they sat in silence for a while. She asked him about his daughter. He told her about Callie, about her love of puzzles and her terrible singing voice, and the way she fell asleep clutching a stuffed rabbit. He told her about his wife, about the cancer, about the long nights in the hospital when he realized he was going to raise their daughter alone. Serafina listened. Then she told him something she had never told anyone. She had lost a baby once, years ago, before she met Clinton, a miscarriage at 12 weeks. She had been alone in a hotel room, attending a conference. And she had bled through the night, too afraid to call for help. Too ashamed to admit she was failing at something so fundamental. This pregnancy, she said, was her second chance. She had used IVF, selected a donor, gone through the procedures alone. She told no one, because she could not bear to lose another child in public. She hid her belly. Because she was terrified. The board would see her as weak, as distracted, as less. Elias understood. He told her about the nights he cried in the bathroom so Callie would not hear. He told her about the shame of being a janitor when he used to be a technician, about the way people looked through him as if he did not exist. He told her that dignity was not about titles or money. It was about showing up, even when the world told you that you did not matter. Their empathy dissolved the barriers between them. For a moment, the CEO and the janitor were just two people who had survived loss and learned to carry it quietly. That night, Callie left a voicemail on Elias's phone. She had recorded herself singing a lullaby. Off-key and sweet. She said it was for the baby that Miss Serafina was carrying. Because babies like music, Elias played the message for Serafina. For the first time in months, she laughed. It was a soft, genuine sound, and it broke something open inside her. The investigation moved quickly. Constance filed a motion to seize the maintenance records under whistleblower protection laws. Damien responded with a counter-motion, claiming the records were protected by attorney-client privilege. The legal battle escalated. The board called emergency meetings. Investors demanded explanations. Damien fought back. He leaked a story to the business press, suggesting that Serafina was unstable, distracted, unable to lead. He pointed to her erratic hours, her closed-door meetings, her sudden interest in maintenance protocols. He suggested, in carefully worded language, that her judgment was compromised. Serafina countered by publicly reinstating Elias as a safety consultant. She issued a press release, stating that his expertise in building systems had proven invaluable during a routine audit. She did not mention the conspiracy. She did not accuse Damien, but she put Elias back in the building, with access to files, with a reason to ask questions. Damien's temper slipped during a board meeting. He accused Serafina of grandstanding, of creating distractions, of prioritizing personal vendettas over the merger. His voice rose. His face flushed. The board members shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, they saw the cracks in his polished facade. That night, Elias's apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen. But his drawers were ransacked. His files were moved. Someone wanted him to know they had been there. Someone wanted him afraid. Elias did not scare easily. But he had Callie to protect. He called Ronnie, his friend from maintenance, and asked if Callie could stay with him for a few days. Ronnie agreed. Elias packed his daughter's bag, kissed her forehead, and told her he had to fix something big. She asked if he was in trouble. He said no. He said he was making things right, but alone in the apartment, Elias locked the doors and checked the windows. He knew the endgame was coming. He knew Damien would not stop until the truth was buried, and he knew that Serafina was risking everything to uncover it. 2 weeks later, Dr. Louisa Penn called Serafina into her office for a routine ultrasound. The appointment was unremarkable until the doctor reviewed the genetic screening results. Something was wrong with the donor records. The file listed Clinton Marlowe as the biological father, but the genetic markers did not match. Dr. Penn asked when Serafina had last seen Clinton. Serafina said 6 months ago, before the IVF procedure. The doctor frowned. She pulled up the lab records. The donor sample was dated 3 years earlier, collected from a biomedical research study conducted by Stratton's medical division. The sample ID matched a participant named Elias Turner. Serafina stopped breathing. Dr. Penn repeated the information slowly, carefully. Genetic markers confirmed a match. The baby she was carrying was biologically Elias's child. Not Clinton's. Not a random donor's. Elias, Serafina asked how that was possible. Dr. Penn explained. The IVF lab was a partner facility, managed by Stratton's medical division. Years ago, Elias had donated samples for a research study on biomedical tissue regeneration. Those samples were supposed to be destroyed after the study ended, but someone had kept them. Someone had filed them incorrectly, labeled them incorrectly, and used them without consent. It was a mistake, or it was a crime. Either way, the implications were staggering. Serafina sat in the sterile exam room, trembling. She thought about the elevator rescue, about Elias's calm hands, about the way he had stayed with her in the conference room and made her tea. She thought about Callie's voicemail, about the lullaby sung for a baby that was, biologically, her half-sibling. She called Elias that night. She asked him to meet her at a park near his apartment, somewhere public and neutral. When he arrived, she handed him the lab report. She could not speak. She watched his face as he read the document. She watched his eyes move over the words, over the genetic markers, over the impossible truth. Elias looked up at her. He did not speak for a long time. Then he asked if she was okay. She nodded. He asked if the baby was healthy. She nodded again. He folded the paper and handed it back. He said, "We need to uncover what they did, for the child's sake. Not for him, not for her, for the child." Serafina realized, in that moment, that Elias was not going to demand anything. He was not going to claim rights or make threats. He was simply going to do what he always did. Show up, stand steady, protect the people who mattered. They agreed to continue the investigation. But now the stakes were higher. This was not just about corporate negligence. This was about stolen genetic material. About unethical practices buried inside Stratton's medical division. About human lives treated as commodities. Constance Lee moved quickly. She secured a court warrant to seize the lab servers before they could be purged. She filed motions under bioethics violation statutes, invoking federal oversight. She built a case that reached far beyond a single elevator malfunction. She built a case that could bring down the entire medical division and everyone who had enabled it. Damian Crosswell realized too late that the investigation had moved beyond his control. He instructed the IT department to trigger a digital wipe of the lab servers. Scheduled to execute at midnight, he thought he could erase the evidence before the warrant was enforced. He thought he had won, but Elias Turner had spent 3 years working in the building. He knew the service corridors. He knew the server room was accessible through a maintenance tunnel that bypassed security. He knew the codes, the schedules, the blind spots. At 11:43 that night, Elias entered the service tunnel. He wore his old janitor uniform, carried a maintenance badge that Ronnie had quietly reactivated. He moved through the basement corridors, past the boiler room, past the storage closets, to the locked door marked IT infrastructure. He used a bypass key, a relic from his old job, and slipped inside. The server room was cold and humming with machinery. Rows of towers blinked with green and red lights. In the corner, a monitor displayed the wipe protocol. Timer. 17 minutes. Elias worked fast. He pulled the physical drives from the primary server bank, disconnecting the cables with the precision of someone who had built biomedical equipment in another life. He filled his maintenance bag with drives, wrapped them in antistatic cloth, and sealed the bag. He reset the timer to buy himself time. Then he left the way he came. At midnight, the wipe protocol executed. The servers erased themselves. But the evidence was already gone, safe in a maintenance bag in the back of Elias's car. The next morning, the boardroom at Stratton Industries was full. Every executive, every board member, every investor on the line. Serafina Caldwell stood at the head of the table, flanked by Constance Lee. Damian Crosswell sat across from her, his silver suit immaculate, his diamond watch gleaming. He smiled faintly, confident that the evidence had been destroyed. Constance placed a hard drive on the table. Then another. Then another. 6 drives total, each labeled with federal evidence tags. She explained, in calm legal language, what they contained: falsified donor records, unauthorized use of genetic material, embryo tampering, human trials conducted without consent, a billion-dollar medical division built on unethical practices, buried under layers of corporate bureaucracy. Damien's smile faded. He stood, attempting to object, to claim the evidence was inadmissible, to deflect. But the boardroom doors opened. 2 FBI agents entered, followed by a federal prosecutor. They placed handcuffs on Damien Crosswell, while the room watched in silence. His diamond watch caught the light one last time, as his hands were pulled behind his back. Serafina stood before the board. She apologized for the chaos. She apologized for the investigation, for the disruption, for the fact that she had hidden her pregnancy out of fear. But she did not apologize for seeking the truth. She said that Elias Turner had saved her life, and then he had saved the integrity of the company. She said that without him, none of them would know how deep the corruption ran. The board voted unanimously to terminate the medical division contracts. They voted to establish an independent ethics review, and they voted to retain Serafina Caldwell as CEO. 3 months later, Serafina held a press conference outside Stratton Industries headquarters. She stood at a podium, visibly pregnant now, flanked by Constance Lee and Elias Turner. She announced the launch of the Turner Ethics Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to protecting donor rights and ensuring transparency in fertility treatments. Elias, standing beside her in a new suit that still felt strange on his shoulders, was introduced as the foundation's first head of safety engineering. The press took photos. The cameras flashed. Callie watched from the front row, her eyes wide with pride. Serafina spoke about accountability, about the responsibility of corporations to the people they served. She spoke about the janitor who had refused to stay silent, who had risked everything to uncover the truth. She did not mention the DNA results. That was private. That was for them. After the press conference, Elias received the final DNA test results. Official. Legal. Confirmed. The baby Serafina carried was his biological child. He stared at the paper for a long time. Then he called Serafina. They met that evening in her office. She handed him a legal document, drafted by Constance. It granted him shared guardianship, with full parental rights. She said she would not hide the truth from the child. She said she wanted Elias to be part of their lives, if he wanted to be. Elias looked at her. He thought about all the ways this story could have ended differently. He thought about the elevator, the firing, the smear campaign, the break-in. He thought about the night he had made her tea, and the way she had told him about the baby she lost. He thought about Callie's voicemail, the lullaby sung for a sibling she did not yet know she had. He said yes, but not as a scandal, not as a headline, as family. On a warm afternoon in early spring, Elias and Serafina walked through a park near Green Lake. Callie ran ahead, chasing pigeons, her laughter bright against the blue sky. Serafina's belly was round now, the baby due in 6 weeks. She moved slowly, one hand resting on her lower back. They sat on a bench, overlooking the water. Callie came running back, breathless and happy. She asked if she could feel the baby kick. Serafina smiled and guided the little girl's hand to her belly. Callie's eyes went wide when she felt the movement. She asked if the baby could hear her. Serafina said yes. Callie leaned close and whispered, "I am going to teach you all the best games." Elias knelt beside them, his hand joining Callie's on Serafina's belly. The 3 of them stayed like that for a moment, framed by golden afternoon light, the water glittering behind them. Somewhere, a camera flashed. The press had found them, but it did not matter. This moment was not for them. Serafina looked at Elias. She said, "We will do this right. Not as a scandal, not as a headline, as family." Elias nodded. He thought about the elevator, about the jammed doors and the smoke, and the moment when Serafina's eyes had locked onto his. He thought about how far they had come since then, from strangers separated by glass walls and job titles, to allies bound by truth, to something deeper that neither of them had expected. Callie asked if they could get ice cream. Serafina laughed. Elias said yes. They stood and walked together toward the park entrance. 3 people building a family, not from romance or convenience, but from courage and integrity, and the simple decision to tell the truth. Across the city, In a federal courthouse, Damian Crosswell was sentenced to 12 years for fraud, obstruction of justice, and unethical medical practices. His diamond watch was entered into evidence. His silver suits hung in an empty closet. His empire, built on lies and shortcuts, had collapsed. At Stratton Industries, the board implemented new oversight protocols. The Turner Ethics Foundation received its first round of funding. Donor registries were audited. Consent forms were rewritten, and in the lobby, where Elias had once pushed a maintenance cart in a faded uniform, a plaque was installed near the elevators. It read, "In recognition of those who speak truth to power, Serafina gave birth 6 weeks later to a healthy boy. She named him Miles, after her father." Elias was in the delivery room, holding her hand, the way he had held his wife's hand years before. When the baby cried, strong and loud, Elias felt something break open in his chest. Hope. Not the fragile kind, but the kind built on solid ground. Callie met her brother the next day. She held him carefully, her face serious with concentration. She sang him the same lullaby she had sung on the voicemail months ago. This time, she did not miss a note. The four of them appeared together in a family portrait commissioned for the Foundation's first annual report. Serafina sat in the center, holding Miles. Elias stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder. Callie knelt in front, grinning at the camera. They looked like what they were, a family built not from biology or tradition, but from something stronger, from choice, from truth, from the refusal to let injustice have the final word. Years later, when Miles was old enough to ask questions, they would tell him the whole story. The elevator, the firing, the investigation, the DNA test. They would tell him that love is not always simple, and family is not always conventional, but truth is always worth fighting for. They would tell him that his life began with a rescue, and was built on the courage of people who refused to stay silent. And when he asked why his father had risked everything, Elias would say, "Because you mattered. Because your mother mattered. Because the truth mattered." And that is all there is. In the end, the story was not about scandal or headlines. It was about a janitor who saw a woman trapped in an elevator and decided to help. It was about a CEO who realized that power means nothing without integrity. It was about two broken people who found healing in the decision to tell the truth, even when the truth was costly. It was about the fact that dignity does not come from titles or wealth. It comes from showing up, standing steady, and protecting the people who matter. It comes from the quiet decision, made over and over, to do what is right. And sometimes, when the world is watching, when the cameras flash and the headlines scream, the most powerful thing you can do is kneel beside the people you love, rest your hand on a future you helped protect, and whisper, "We will do this right. Together. As family." Night to wine. 2. Night 2. End. Night 2. The elevator doors that once trapped Serafina were repaired and inspected and certified safe. But every time Elias walked past them, he remembered. He remembered the smoke and the fear and the beeping monitor. He remembered the moment when everything could have gone wrong and did not. He remembered that sometimes the distance between catastrophe and grace is just one person deciding to act. One person refusing to walk away. One person saying, "I will stay. I will help. I will tell the truth." And in a